Serious therapists, what is something people are afraid to tell you because they think it's weird, but that you've actually heard a lot of times before? The amount of people I see who feel like they should be grieving a certain way and are afraid that they must not have loved someone, or must not have cared. People grieve in all sorts of ways. The 5 stages of grief are bullshit. I was consulting with another clinician who was seeing a couple whose daughter had died. The wife was convinced that the husband must not have cared about her because he wasn't grieving out loud. In reality, while she had been going to support groups and outwardly expressing, he had been continuing to work in a garden that him and his daughter had kept when she was alive, using that time to process and grieve as he did. Both were perfectly fine ways of grieving, however it is expected that one's grief is more than the other. They both ended up working it out, however, he driving her and others to their weekly support group, her attempting to work in the garden with him on the condition that they didn't talk. Really sweet. To that same extent, the amount of people who are unaware of their own emotions and emotional process is astounding. So many people feel only angry or happy and worry something must be wrong with them otherwise. Normalizing feeling the whole gamut is just as important. Recognizing what we're feeling as well as what it feels like in our body when we're feeling is incredibly helpful for understanding how we process and feel. As a whole, how we treat emotions as a society is kinda fucked. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Edit, Gamut not Gambit. Unwanted intrusive thoughts are normal and do not mean you are a bad person, yes, even intrusions of sexual/religious/moral themes. By definition, these are thoughts that are unwanted bc they go against your own values and highlight what you don't want to do, e.g., a religious person having unwanted blasphemous images pop into their mind, or a new parent having unwanted sexual thoughts about their new baby. However normal these thoughts are, over 90% of the population, the moral nature of these thoughts mean that often people experience a lot of shame and take many years before they first tell someone about them. Edit. Because this is getting more visibility that I realized, the occurrence of these thoughts/images/urges are normal. The best way to manage them is to accept that they are a normal, albeit unpleasant, brain process, and a sign of the opposite of who you are and are therefore unlikely to ever do. Let the thought run its course in the background while you bring your attention back to, insert something you can see/feel/hear/taste/touch. I usually say something like okay mind. Thanks for that mind. I'm going to get back to washing the dishes and the sound/sensation of the water while you ponder all the nasties. Carry on. I literally say it to myself with a slightly amused tone bc I am always genuinely amused at all the wild stuff my brain can produce. Someone I know had some of these thoughts and it freaked her out. She told someone at a postpartum group and the woman leading her took her over to the hospital and had her admitted for psychiatric watch. She didn't say nor did she have any desire to do those actions. She just visualized it and it frightened her and neither the postpartum group nor the hospital knew how to deal with it. They kept her for 3 days before transferring her to a facility where it took another 2 days to finally see someone who was qualified to talk about mental health and they were somewhat appalled by the whole scenario. They just told her that she needed to get some uninterrupted sleep and maybe to see a therapist to help her talk through things. It was incredibly hard and frustrating. It took quite a few more years to actually get over the trauma of being admitted when trying to seek help and I'm not sure she has really gotten over it. Edit, because some people are saying it's laughably false I should clarify, she went to the postpartum group because she was looking for help. When the person leading it said she needed more serious help she believed them and when they admitted her she did so willingly thinking that she was a danger to her child. That is why I commented originally. Because people around her thought that intrusive thoughts were bad and validated her own fears. Thank you so much for saying this. I struggled with this, specifically I had massive anxiety around gore and violence when I was 14 and seeing any whether it was real or fake or even implied, like an off-screen death in a movie, and my brain would come up with the most awful and horrendous and vile images of things, including people I knew. The whole spectrum of my problem is deeper than what I'll go into and more complicated than what I'll say. I genuinely thought I was going fucking crazy, thought I was gonna end up on horrible meds or locked up for thinking like this even though I didn't want to think like this. I hated these thoughts. I couldn't look at normal everyday objects without somehow linking them to awful murderous or graphic scenes. I eventually got CBT therapy for this as it was completely ruining my life, but one of the absolute biggest bits of relief I have ever had was being told that intrusive thoughts were extremely common and that I wasn't a lunatic in the making. It was extremely difficult to admit some of the more graphic and upsetting things I was thinking, but goddamn once I did and it wasn't met with disgust and I was told that lots of people get these thoughts, I was so happy. Again, reading your comment has reminded me of how common it really is and reaffirmed me that I wasn't and am still not that weird for it. Thank you. Another great example for this from my experience is that I'm a late 20s male teacher and spent a couple years substituting at the high school level until settling down in a middle school. In the beginning, it was absolutely horrifying to me that there were some students who were undeniably sexually attractive. I thought I was a monster and hadn't realized it until now, but my therapist just asked, well, if you had the chance to have sex with any of them knowing it was consensual and you'd never get caught, would you do it? Then before I could answer he said, don't even worry about answering that out loud. Just ask it to yourself. If the answer is yes, we should talk about this topic more. If the answer is no, then you are absolutely, 100% normal. Basically he explained to me that it was a textbook intrusive thought because I could become sexually aroused by their appearance but at the same time absolutely disgusted when even imagining actually engaging. He said it's important to be honest with myself and make sure my answer would be the same if it were a 0% chance I'd ever get caught and the other party was consensually enjoying it, i.e. not rape. Still to this day that helped me a lot because I have not even a sliver of doubt that I would never in a million years follow through with that arousal, but a junior or senior in yoga pants and a crop top can still potentially lead to natural arousal. I had to learn this lesson as a client. I suffer with ADHD and struggled immensely with starting and completing my graduate work when I was getting my master's, to the point of sometimes making no progress and not completing any work and putting my student status in jeopardy. My therapist had an idea for me to text him at the end of each day to let him know what I had gotten done, as a way of holding myself accountable to someone else. However, I struggled to even do that and after 2 days, stopped texting him because I still wasn't completing any work and was too embarrassed to tell him. When I came in for my session the following week, I very clearly looked embarrassed and couldn't properly look him in the eye. He said, dude, you're coming in here looking like you just killed someone or something. It's okay. You're going to make progress and it's okay if you're not successful at first, it's all a part of learning to improve. You don't need to be scared or embarrassed if you don't succeed the first time. If you don't complete any work, just tell me. I'm not going to be mad at you, I'm here to encourage you and help you manage yourself better. It really helped to hear that because I put so much pressure on myself even though my ability to do things normally is compromised. I still see the same therapist, he's great and has helped me improve a lot since then. Oh man, I had a therapist when I was like 17 to 18, and she would always ask me if I'd done my, literal, homework. Like, school homework. And I never had, so she would always get downright huffy and talk about how I was lazy and just needed to pull myself together and do it because nobody was going to want to hire me and I wasn't going to get into college if I didn't do my homework and do it well. Which, like, fair enough, but I was already getting enough of that from my teachers, and this just made me dread therapy to the point where I ended up dropping off the map and stopped going to therapy for a year or two. I tried to start conversations where I explained how the fundamental issue was not feeling safe at home, and that slowing down, moving from distraction to quiet, thoughtful study, was really anxiety-inducing and fear-inducing for me, because my brain was just really busy and overwhelmed with anxiety and dread. I'd ask for advice on how to manage that better so that I could do my homework. But she'd just get angry and say you just have to do it. Like she took it from guilt directly into shame, and that sucked as someone who already has a lot of internalized shame. I see 2 great therapists now for 2 different reasons, one is EMDR, and I cannot believe I put up with the homework shaming lady for so long. Psychologist in the US. To name a few, compulsive masturbation, fears of being a pedophile/rapist, this is a common OCD fear, hoarding, sexual performance difficulties, history of sexual abuse or sexual assault, unfortunately it is very common, drug use, amount of money spent on various things, having an ASD diagnosis, going back to an abusive relationship/staying in an abusive relationship, grieving years and years after a loss, self-harm of all sorts, wanting to abandon their current lifestyle, for example, to have more sex, to escape responsibility or expectations, history of gang violence/crime, their sexuality or asexuality, gender identity, the impact of racism/racial trauma, paranoia, hallucinations, feeling uncomfortable in therapy, not believing in therapy, difficulty trusting a therapist, fear of psychiatric medication, fear of doctors in general. I was surprised to see suicidal ideation on others' responses. Most of my clients seem to talk very openly about suicidal thoughts and urges from the start of therapy, which I think is super healthy. I think that most of the people I've worked with had SI, current or history. As weird as it may seem, I can't imagine what a life without any thoughts about suicide would even look like. At this point, I don't recall a time a patient said something in therapy and I was shocked or even thought, oh, that's new. And IMO, if you surprise your therapist, that is okay. I wonder if we ask Reddit, what are you afraid to tell anyone, even a therapist, because you think it is weird? How many people would see that they aren't that weird at all? Seek to understand why. So, if it was say, stealing, the part of us that stole, had a good reason for doing that. It could be I needed the money/thing, it made me feel better because I was lonely, I was angry at them, so I took something. It almost always comes from an unmet need, money, love, acceptance, to be valued, important, etc. We do everything in aid of our survival. If you can be curious about the positive outcome you sought and the need you were meeting through the behavior, it helps to then have compassion. Example, I've heard of abuse victims then experimenting with other children and feeling terrible guilt and shame. When explored, it showed that they sought to have control, to connect, to feel some sense of agency, to be less alone. All of which is completely understandable and to a degree, worked. They did feel connected, in the only way they knew how. They did feel a sense of agency and control. That helped them survive. They weren't trying to cause harm to another child, only to be less alone with their own pain. This behavior had not continued into adulthood and they were seeking peace. Knowing this helped them to care for the child in them who had suffered so much. To let go of the guilt and shame and start to live more. They sought to learn how to play, how to have fun, how to connect in new and different ways. They helped other people in recovering from abuse. Shame seeks to isolate us and healing only happens as we come out of isolation. I do a lot of trauma work. Many people who have experienced molestation or sexual assault feel ashamed and confused because their bodies responded. Having an erection/lubrication or even an orgasm does not mean you wanted the sexual contact and it is still assault. Clients often hold a lot of shame and confusion about this. They wonder if it means they wanted it or if there is something wrong with them. It is a tough thing to work through because of this. Assault is assault. Sometimes human bodies respond to sexual touch even when we don't want that touch. Edited to say, wow. Thanks for the awards and likes. I hope that anyone reading this who is struggling with feeling weird about their reactions to rape/assault/unwanted touch feels reassured. I also hope you find a good therapist or a good friend to talk to about this. It is one part of your life story, but it isn't the story of you. You get to craft the narrative of your life. Maybe this is a chapter in that story, but it is not the whole thing. Trauma is a thing we experience, it doesn't get to define who we are. I work with a lot of anxiety and trauma clients. Whenever I ask if they would describe their experience as being anxious about being anxious, I get a lot of OMG, yes. Anxiety has such a physical impact in the body, heart pounding, trouble breathing, feeling faint or cold, tunnel vision, that we become aware of our body's reaction before we even notice the anxious thoughts triggering the reaction. CPS was called once by my school counselor after she tried to kill me. I wasn't allowed to go to the authorities about anything since both her and my father were selling opiates at the time. When my parents found out that CPS was coming, I was grounded and told my parents were going to prison and us kids were going to foster care. My family was going to be broken up and I was told it was my fault for talking to someone about it, even though I didn't know about or understand what a mandated reporter was. By the time CPS came, I was groomed to say that everything was fine in the home. That my mother's insane outburst of Herculean strength and Hulk-like anger was a reaction to a tetanus shot. That I felt safe and protected in my environment and there was no cause for concern. I even had to learn a new song on the piano just for the CPS worker. The whole visit was literally a performance. I'm still not sure what caused my mom to flip out that day, but I'm assuming it was some kind of bad drug reaction that both of them took since dad was acting weird, too. My mom is a narcissist and a con artist. I have so many stories of her being a fucked up parent. I'm still not over it all, despite years of therapy. Your story relates to a similar experience I had. One of my mom's boyfriends had beat me so hard with a belt that it left huge purple bruises up and down my legs and butt, for being too loud while they were doing drugs. I was around 5 to 6 at the time and just wanted someone to help. I talked to my teacher at school about it, because they had just had a presentation about not keeping silent on abuse, teachers are there to help you, etc. When I went to my teacher though, she brought me to the nurse, and I think the school secretary joined. They had me pull down my pants and show them, which I did. Then they proceeded to not say anything to me, and sent me back to class. When I got home, my mom beat me for saying anything, and told me the family would be broke up, my brothers and I would be foster care, the whole spiel. I never once got a CPS worker out to my house, and my teacher never spoke about it again. I was just left in that shitty environment of steadily escalating abuse, and lost all trust in adults or telling anyone what happened to me, because I didn't think I'd be believed. Fucking everything, dude. Everything. You name it, I've heard it. You regret having your child and wish you never became a mom? Okay. You love your spouse but their cancer came back again and you don't know how you can go through this fight again? Yeah, I get that. Hard drugs. Shit, it's been a hard year. You wanna quit your well-paying job to sell carved soap figurines. Okay, well let's talk through what that might look like. You like to collect teddy bears because they give you a special lil tingle in your nether regions. I don't kink shame. Seriously. We've heard everything. Everything. Unless it's someone newish to the field, less than 5 years maybe, it's generally not going to shock us. And whatever it is, even if it does seem a bit of a unique circumstance, we'll get the underlying feeling under it. In the end, everyone wants the same overall things: to feel heard, to be loved, to take care of their loved ones, to manage stress, etc. Humans do the best they can, and therapists are there to help, but we can't provide guidance if you don't give us a chance, and that means opening up. I know it's scary and some therapists do suck. It's a lot like dating. If you don't click with the first one, move on until you find one you do click with. What's scary is that for some people, expressing positive growth in some spaces, particularly outpatient therapy, does decrease priority for them. It's something I've had happen to me, and that I've seen happen to others, in outpatient clinic care, particularly low-income clinic care. The therapists at these clinics are massively overworked, and people with long-term problems aren't guaranteed long-term therapy, since the therapists need space for incoming patients. If you show signs of improvement, there starts to be subtle push toward leaving therapy, regardless of how chronic your condition is. A lot of lower-income people struggle to find long-term, consistent outpatient care if they need it. I have severe mental health problems, at a level that I know I will likely need to be in some level treatment for the rest of my life. I've been trying to find a therapist who will give me consistent care for years, and the closest outpatient, private practice with someone in the specialty I need, that also takes my insurance, is nearly 100 miles away. So I have no choice but to go to clinics. That's why the clinics are so swamped and understaffed. Essentially treat patients as get you in, fix you as best we can, get you out to make sure that they can provide care to as many people as possible. I'm really sorry that happened. My first therapist suddenly cancelled my CBT sessions after the first one. 2 months prior I told him I occasionally smoked weed. He actually asked me if I drank and I said no, but in the interest of transparency sometimes I smoke, and he said okay and the topic was dropped. I talked about the reason why I seeked out medical professionals, that I am clinically depressed and I struggle to open up to people and that I think about death and suicide constantly. Then after my first session in therapy he just stopped scheduling meetings. I emailed him the journal he asked me to keep and 2 months later he called me and told me that he's cancelling my sessions because he thinks my drug use interferes too much. He hadn't even read my journal. I was shocked because it was something I mentioned so long ago and it was something I felt was so insignificant in my life. I have real difficulty opening up about my feeling to anyone and this was the first time ever, after years of slowly building my confidence enough to contact a professional. And in that moment I had never felt more judged in my life. I felt like worthless and any problems I have are not worth dealing with. I was embarrassed that I told him that I think about suicide so much and that I have nightly panic attacks about death. I contemplated suicide after that, but my girlfriend stopped me and convinced me to try another therapist. I feel like crying even just talking about it. I'm so sorry that happened to you, man. It's one of my worst interactions when another person, it hurts my heart when I think about it. I'm really sorry, dude. Hello, therapist here. There are several. Speaking to their departed loved ones. Thankfully, theories now support this and don't consider it to be a sign they're not moving on with their lives. I encourage my clients to explore the continuation of their relationships with the deceased. Small ways they've made progress in the week. I know this isn't technically weird, but my clients sometimes don't want to tell me this, either because they fear I'd turn around and say they don't need therapy anymore, or because I might find the progress unnoteworthy. Both of which are totally untrue. That they're having bizarre intrusive thoughts of hurting themselves/others, sexual fantasies, and so on. As a therapist, I'm trained to appreciate the whole world that lies between thoughts and action, and all it really proves is that we have an imagination. It's highly unlikely I'll need to break confidentiality, and won't call the police immediately. Sex-related things in general. Eventually we'll talk about sex, and I'll see a weight lifted off their shoulders for how unfazed I am by their apparently weird sex life. Honestly, it's rarely that weird, and we all have kinks. Life is fruitful, there's no need to be ashamed. For the record, we won't. Unless you think it's active. That's when the real nightmares start. I was institutionalized, basically arrested by armed cops when I hadn't committed any crime. I was locked in a room with people who were the kind of irrational, unstable crazy, an unkind word, but it's applicable here, you see in tasteless horror movies. One of them spent an hour banging his head into a wall. I thought a wrong word to any of them might make them attack me. I was strip-searched and forced to sign paperwork saying I was financially responsible for what was happening, even if I objected to my treatment. I wasn't told when, or if, I would be able to leave. I wasn't allowed to call my friends or family, even if I could have gotten past the shame. I managed to see 2 doctors the next morning, and my goal became telling them whatever they wanted to hear to let me the fuck out. I managed it after only 1 night, literally the worst night of my life. I was forced to pay $1,000 for being kidnapped and imprisoned after committing no crime. I understand that everyone there thought they were helping me, that they were doing the right thing. They were wrong. I will never, ever tell anyone in any kind of authority that I'm thinking of hurting myself ever again. I almost never even hint at it to my closest friends. I would rather be successfully suicidal than repeat that experience.